in a small village nestled by the Red River, where rows of modest houses leaned quietly under old bamboo trees. There lived a man named Lamb. He was over 50 years old, thin, slightly hunched, with a face that always carried the weight of exhaustion. People in the village simply called him Lamb the carpenter. For most of his life, he had relied on his saws, chisels, and wooden boards to feed his family. In recent years, a heavy silence had fallen over Lamb's small workshop. The machines began to rust, wood piled up, unused, and his own body grew weaker with each passing day. One cold winter morning, while smoothing a wooden plank, Lamb suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed right there on the workshop floor. At the district hospital, the diagnosis was swift and brutal: advanced tuberculosis. Made worse by long-term physical exhaustion, the wards hit Lamb like a physical blow. He froze. To him, the illness wasn't just a medical condition, it was a giant question mark hanging over his entire family. Where would the money for treatment come from? Who would support his wife and children now? What future could possibly remain? During his first days in the hospital, Lamb did little more than stare at the white ceiling, listening to the constant hum of machines and the hurried footsteps of nurses in the hallway. He felt utterly useless. A man who once carried his family on his broad shoulders could no longer even stand on his own 2 feet. His wife, Ho, was a pillar of quiet strength. She would wake up every day at 4 in the morning to sell vegetables at the market, then rush to the hospital to be by his side. Their eldest son, seeing the family's plight, quit his vocational school to take up work as a construction helper, trading his future for their present. Their youngest daughter, still in high school, stayed up late each night, packing paper goods for a little extra income to help make ends meet. The weight of it all was crushing. One afternoon, overwhelmed by guilt and despair, Lamb turned his face toward the wall and whispered to his wife, "Maybe we should just stop the treatment. We should save the money for the children." Ho grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly tight. Her voice trembled, but her words were firm and unyielding. "As long as you are alive, this family still stands. If you give up on yourself, then everything truly collapses." Lamb said nothing in return, but deep inside, the small flame of hope he'd been clinging to had almost gone out. One evening, after being moved to a lighter care room, Lamb noticed the elderly man in the bed next to his. The man was over 70, thin and frail, yet his eyes held a bright and steady light. Seeing the profound sadness on Lamb's face, the old man struck up a conversation. Preview. After listening quietly to Lamb's story, he smiled gently and asked a simple question. "Do you know an Arabic proverb?" Lamb just shook his head. The old man spoke slowly, his voice calm and measured. "He who has health has hope, and he who has hope has everything." Then, he shared his own story. He had been a soldier, severely wounded in battle, so close to death that everyone had given up on him. What saved him, he explained, was not brute strength or luck, but a stubborn belief that he could survive. "Right now," the old man continued, looking directly at Lamb, "you only need to do one thing: get better, little by little. Just focus on that. The money, the work, your dignity. All of those things come after your health." The words were simple, yet for Lamb, they were like a drill boring straight through the thick wall of despair that had built up inside his heart. It was the spark he so desperately needed. From that day forward, something inside Lamb shifted. He began to cooperate fully with his treatment. He took his medicine on time, without complaint. He practiced the breathing exercises the doctors taught him. He started walking, slowly at first, along the hospital corridor. Each day, he managed only a few more steps than the last, but he never, ever stopped. Ho noticed the change in him, this small but powerful return of his spirit, and cried quiet tears of relief. After being discharged, Lamb was still too weak for the heavy labor of carpentry. But his mind was sharp, and his hands still knew the language of wood. Instead of lifting heavy planks, he began teaching his woodworking skills to the young men in the village. He charged them nothing. All he wanted was for the craft he loved to survive and be passed on. One of his students, a boy named Tuan, came from a very poor family and had previously dropped out of school. Under Lamb's patient guidance, Tuan blossomed. He learned to create finely crafted wooden items. his hands becoming as skilled as his master's. Eventually, Tuon opened his own small workshop, and in a beautiful act of gratitude, he returned to help Lamb, sharing his profits and his labor. Slowly, Lamb's old workshop came back to life. It wasn't with the loud hum of machinery running all day. It didn't make them rich overnight, but it was enough. It was enough for the family to escape the suffocating grip of desperation. More importantly, with purpose and a lighter heart, Lamb himself grew stronger every single day. Lamb's story of resilience spread throughout the village. People no longer saw him as the sick man or an object of pity. They saw him as a man who faced the abyss and refused to surrender. The village committee even invited him to speak to the local youth, to share his experience. Lamb stood before them, not as a hero, but as a survivor, and shared one simple message. I once believed that losing my health meant losing everything. But I learned that as long as your hope remains, a path will always open up before you. Years later, a new joy entered Lamb's life. His youngest daughter was accepted into a prestigious teacher training university. Holding her acceptance letter, she ran to her father and hugged him tightly, whispering, "This is because you didn't give up, Dad, because you fought." Lamb smiled a slow, gentle, but unshakable smile. The kind of smile that comes only after weathering the greatest of storms. In many cultures, especially in Asia, people often carry heavy responsibilities on their shoulders for family, for honor, for duty. When illness strikes, the greatest fear is often not the pain itself, but the fear of becoming a burden to the ones we love. Yet, as that wise old man in the hospital taught, and as Lamb's life so powerfully proves, when there is health, there is hope. When there is hope, there is a future. And sometimes, when all else seems lost, all you need to remember is that as long as there is breath in your lungs, there is always a way forward. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please consider sharing it and subscribing for more content that inspires